Welcome to Dynasty Playbook, Dynasty FF's dedicated podcast. I'm your host, Drew. You can find me on Reddit at EAF Marine and on Twitter at Drew.NFL. With me, my co-host, Dave. I got one person today I can't even say the right name. Tyler. Tyler, you can find on Reddit at Barrels. You can find him on Twitter, finally, at HBomb9508. Dynasty Playbook is new and improved this week. Audio quality should be a little bit better, but Scott's also not here. Doesn't mean it's better, but it's probably better. How you doing tonight, bud?
Man, I'm doing good. Enjoying the new technology. We got the new mics. We got the logo. We're stepping our game up. So let's see if we can't make it a little bit better tonight.
Yeah, setting expectations high. That's never a good idea. Keep the
No.
bar low. That's what I learned when I got married. All right, let's start off with the week in review. And this whole show is pretty much going to be the week in review because this is the most bonkers ass free agency I've dealt with since I started following football. Let's start off with pretty much the most devastating news I had as a Saints fan, and that was the Jimmy Graham trade. Jimmy Graham got traded to the Seattle Seahawks for Max Unger and a first-round pick. In hindsight, the trade makes sense. You know, it fills a huge position of need for the Saints and gives us some more draft capital. But it definitely hurts right here in my heart. All right, what are your thoughts on Jimmy Graham now? Is he still your tight end too? Is he dropping?
No, I mean he's the tight end too, and it's not even close for me. Just because who else would you put in there? I mean, does he take a value drop? I suppose. I think it's more of a value drop on the surface than anything else. Uh, Seattle just doesn't have the weapons that New Orleans does or did, however you want to put it. Jimmy Graham wasn't logging very many snaps as an inline tight end. He's coming off the field quite a bit. Seattle paid out the nose for this guy. First round draft pick in the NFL is just gold, even if it is super deep. Teams don't move those. I mean, teams don't move those things on a whim because that's where you build your team. So I got to think that Seattle, the fact that they paid so much for Jimmy, they're going to use him. I think he's going to get a lot more work in line. I think he's going to get a lot of work in the slot. He's, I don't see any way he's not the leading target, in Seattle as far as numbers by a large margin by the end of the year, and he's going to be a big red zone target. I think he's going to match well with Russell Wilson too. So yeah, on the surface, it's a little bit of a value drop, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him post very, very similar numbers in Seattle as he did in New Orleans, just based on the fact that he's going to be the man there. And he should, like I said, take more snaps.
I'm right there with you, boss. And I think that one aspect of his game that hardly anyone's talking about is, Breeze isn't a mobile quarterback, but he still scrambles with the best of them. And one of his favorite targets was Jimmy Graham, and Jimmy always found a way to get open. He always, was keeping an eye on Drew Brees. And I think that's going to play right into Russell Wilson's hand. Doug Baldwin showed a propensity to be able to do that, and I think Jimmy's going to be right there with him. It's going to make him a more appealing target in the red zone and a more appealing target just across the middle of the field. His numbers might take a slight dip, like you said, but the people that are dropping him, especially down from tight end too, I can understand, expecting a stat drop just because he's not getting the volume. But who are you going to put him in tight end too? Travis Kelce, who I'm not trusting Andy Reid to utilize anybody right. Julius Thomas, no. Just nobody. It's Jimmy Graham or it's nothing. I think another aspect of this is getting completely ignored is the fact that Max Unger is a huge upgrade at center for the Saints. And the interior defensive line for the Saints is so much more important than the exterior because Drew Brees is a borderline midget. He needs to be able to step up in that pocket to effectively gauge the field. And if he doesn't have that whole center pocket to step up into, because it's getting crashed in on him, then it hurts him. I think if he's got a safer pocket to throw from, then we're going to see better receiving numbers from Brandon Cooks, Nick Toon, Josh Hill, CJ Spiller, Mark Ingram, player X, whoever else they draft. I don't know. But I think this is going to give Drew Brees at least more consistent numbers for the remainder of his career. What do you think this does for the supporting cast for the Saints, besides Brandon Cooks, who is just going to see a bonanza of targets? Is there anybody you're targeting in particular?
Not really. I mean, I suppose Hill'll be a good guy to take a flyer on. I mean, Hill's a nice athlete. He measures well. Of course, we're working under the assumption that New Orleans isn't going to add anyone or anything at tight end, which would make me think that they're at least pretty comfortable with Hill, going forward, not necessarily in the Jimmy Graham role, but as their tight end. So, I could take a flyer on Hill. Toon's a guy that, a lot of us stashed before the waivers closed, knowing that Colston might not be back, this, that, and the other. So, obviously Toon's a decent speculation play, but yeah, it's going to be the Brandon Cooks show. He's the guy. When I first saw the trade, I said biggest beneficiary is 1A Brandon Cooks, 1B Russell Wilson. Those are the two guys that are going to see the most increase in value in my estimation. And, like I said, the rest of the Saints supporting cast, it's nothing to write home about, but targets are targets, so that's about where I'm sitting on it, like I said. Hill, Toon, kind of the running backs. I love that they signed Spiller. We're going to hit on him a little bit in a little bit. So, I think New Orleans realized what they needed to do. They were in cap hell. Their most valuable piece was Jimmy Graham, and they sold him for a premium. So not all that different than what we do in Dynasty football in a rebuild situation. You take your most valuable piece, as much as it hates to move him, you get as much as you possibly can, and you move on. So, like I said, that's kind of where I'm sitting on the deal.
Yep. I'm same spot. Josh Hill, I think it's going to be a big beneficiary. Sean Payton's gushed on him quite a few times, actually. Jimmy Graham's had to play limited snaps in the past because of minor injuries that he's managed to play through to be in games, but not enough to play the majority of snaps. And Hill's been fairly effective when he's been on the field. And I think with an increase of snaps, we'll see a pretty productive tight end. I'm not expecting Jimmy Graham numbers or anything from him, but I wouldn't be surprised if tight end 1 numbers from him. As for Toon, I advocate him as a pickup. I don't know what's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if we went after, even a couple of wide receivers later in the draft, but at this point, trying to guess what the Saints front office is going to do is just it's going to drive me crazy. So, speaking of Saints wide receivers, let's talk about trading Kenny Stills to the Dolphins for Daniel Ellerbe and a 3rd-round pick. Out of all the moves they made this week, this one's maybe just ripped my hair out. There better have been a personality difference because otherwise it doesn't make sense to me. I thought Stills was a great wide receiver. His cap hit was low. And I just don't see the need for it. I think this is great for his value. I think it gives Tannehill another consistent target to go with Landry. And I think people are severely underestimating him, comparing him to Wallace Light, when I think, he can do everything Wallace did. Plus, he can work the middle of the field. He's got a lot more diversity to his game than just, let me run the seam real quick.
Yeah, I can't be objective on Kenny Stills. You see the hat right here? I can't do it. I would take a 3rd rounder, at least an NFL draft 3rd rounder all day over Kenny Stills. Obviously, Drew is more in tune with Kenny Stills, being the Saints fan that he is. But, for me, when I saw it, I was just kind of, whatever. it did make sense to me when it happened. And I remember talking to one of my buddies. I was like, "Yeah, don't be surprised if Wallace gets his walking papers here pretty soon." And sure enough, a few hours later, Wallace is out of town. So Miami knew what was going on. The one thing, and what Drew touched on that makes it kind of a funky deal for New Orleans was the cap hit. They weren't going to be paying him a whole lot to do what he does. But for me, as a fantasy football option, Stills is definition of a week to week dart throw. You just never knew what you were going to get out of the guy. And I'm so completely biased against Kenny Stills that I can't even give you any objectivity or any solid information here other than, you know, boo Kenny Stills.
Yeah. For those of y'all listening on audio, that hat is a fairly orange Texas hat. Uh, and Kenny Stills did not go to Texas. uh, I also like this to increase Tannehill's value fairly significantly. And I say this with only my Tannehill bias fully in effect. I mean, it gives him another consistent target. I think on top of adding Jordan Cameron, who we're going to touch on in a bit, I think this increases his outlook for the future pretty significantly. I think Wallace and him were never really on the same page. I think you saw a pretty significant. I keep using the word significant. I need to expand my vocabulary. I think Tannehill saw some progression this year, having Landry to target and having a go-to guy that wasn't Wallace. So I think having another guy in Stills, he's going to continue to progress this year, and I think we're gonna see some more consistent QB1 numbers out of him. And speaking of QB1s, let's talk about some QBs that aren't in the Nick Foles Sam Bradford trade. I missed so hard on Nick Foles. I was all about him. I thought that, I knew the numbers weren't going to be repeatable, but I liked what I saw out of him in his first real season. I thought that, he might be the future in Philadelphia, and I was wrong. And now he's playing for St. Louis, just a haven of offensive production. What does this do for the Rams wide receivers and for Nick Foles' production?
Who knows? So hard to say. I did not miss on Nick Foles. I didn't take him in any startups last year. The whole situation made me kind of nervous. Watched a lot of him being in. I live in the DFW Metroplex. Cowboys are on TV all the time. Get to see the Eagles a lot. I just thought he was really lacking in arm strength. He was good in that offense because of what they asked him to do, but I just don't see him as a top flight QB1. I mean, I suppose he can go to St. Louis and get the job done, but it's just really tough to say. St. Louis is just a mess. It's Kenny Britt and Tavon Austin and my personal buy low guy, Stedman Bailey, Brian Quick. We keep seeing a wide receiver, not every time, but consistently mocked to them at number 10. It's just kind of a mess. Obviously, Foles is going to be the guy. At least that's the way it looks right now on the surface. He's going to be their guy going into week 1. But it's just super tough to say what it's going to be. What kind of offense are they really going to run? Because if they're asking him to throw 20-yard outs and deep posts, that's not what he does well. He's going to do well if they try to incorporate Tavon into like the swing game, things of that nature. Get Kenny Britt over the middle where he can be somewhat physical. That's where Foles is going to excel, is where he doesn't have to push the ball down the field, let the offense not necessarily flow through him, but work to his strengths is kind of where I feel, where Foles is going to succeed. But it's super tough to say when obviously Chip Kelly didn't want him running his offense. So ship him out for peanut brittle Sam Bradford. See what happens.
Yeah, I gotta kind of agree with you on how they got to use him to have him be successful. I think one of Nick Foles' biggest advantages was he's a pretty smart player. I think they got to put him in a position to where he's able to make his reads and kind of pick apart the defense. But I don't know that he can make all the throws that he's going to need to make. And I think Jeff Fisher is going to have to tailor that offense to what he can do, which Fisher just has an excellent record of tailoring his offense to best utilize his players. I just don't see great results for Foles in the future. He might get it done as a NFL QB, but as a fantasy QB, I'm not optimistic. And as for Bradford, we've got a submitted question for him. We're going to hit on a little bit later. So let's move on to another former Eagle in Jeremy Maclin, going to Kansas City to go be with his old head coach, Andy Reid. I want to be able to kind of say nice things about Jeremy Maclin. I'm good on him for betting on himself this year, taking the 1-year prove-it deal, because dude just went and got paid. He produced like a stud in Philadelphia, but this is just a giant cross-section of things I don't want for Jeremy Maclin. Alex Smith has never thrown 1,000 yards to a wide receiver. Andy Reid has had 4 wide receivers in his 12-year career catch 1,000 yards. 2 of them were Deshaun Jackson. One of them was Terrell Owens. And one of them was too young for me to remember who it was. And Jeremy Maclin didn't catch 1,000 yards till last season. Part of that's a symptom of him playing with Deshaun Jackson. But I can't see this as a formula for Maclin being able to repeat anything close to the numbers he had last year. And I know you're just Maclin's biggest fan. So why don't you let the love flow?
I don't want to get it into it too much. Macklin's never been my guy. Part of the reason why he never, had 1,000 yards receiving in his career is because he's never healthy. Or maybe not necessarily not healthy, but not gonna go every week. So all of a sudden he's in a contract year and he's Mr. Consistent every week. Jeremy Maclin's out there posting numbers. And then he goes to KC, which is maybe not the worst possible landing spot for a free agent wideout, but if it's not the worst, it's pretty damn close, right? I think everybody can agree on that. Macklin's just, we're talking wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, whatever. Wide receiver 2 is going to be in the 12 to 24 range. Is he going to fall in there? Probably. But is he going to catch a dozen touchdowns? Not a chance. I mean, I suppose it could happen, but I'm just not digging it at all. I never was digging Jeremy Maclin, and I'm digging him even less right now in KC, which is just, like I said, just a terrible spot for him. But dude got paid, but I'm not out there buying Jeremy Maclin shares. That's for sure. If I ever was, which I wasn't, I'm not doing it today. So hate that we just have to pile on the Jeremy Maclin hate fest. We knew what it was going to be. Sorry to everybody that loves Jeremy Maclin. We don't.
Yeah, it is what it is. I guess we'll move on to our next one, which is a guy we touched on just a little bit before, and that's Jordan Cameron pulling a fake out and going to Miami when all the reports were saying he's going to the Browns. I had a wonderful Twitter interaction with a Browns fan over this. But what do you think? I mean, and I know it's no Atlanta, but what do you think to this compared to how it was in Cleveland?
I don't know if it really matters. Obviously he's an exceptional athlete. He's got the concussion problem, which is a big problem, especially in today's NFL when it's one of the hot button issues. We're not trying to have a guy have freaking dementia when he's 40 years old. And good on them for doing that. But with the concussion history, man, that's scary stuff. It's not the kind of guy you want to invest in. I mean, I'm a huge Jordan Cameron fan. I think he's a fantastic player, but I don't think his value changes any, if at all, with the move. I think the only places he could have gone where he would have gotten a big value surge would have been Denver, maybe Atlanta, somewhere like that. But the way that Miami runs their offense isn't altogether different than what Cleveland does. A lot of this is going to hinge on what Charles Clay does. As far as I know, he's still out there in limbo. Of course, we've heard him signing anywhere from five different teams to coming back to Miami. But like I said, I like Jordan Cameron. I really do. But man, it makes me nervous trying to buy into him. And this isn't a big enough of a situation shift for me to move him up the rankings at all. I mean, it's just completely neutral as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think you and I are kind of on the same page for his talent evaluation. If he had no concussion history, he'd be my number 3 tight end right now. But God, those concussions scare the shit out of me. He's still firmly, a mid-tier tight end 1, but he had 2 concussions last year. That derailed his entire season, and with each concussion, they become easier and easier to get. It's one of those things where it's a gamble. If you've got him for the time he's on the field, he's a stud. He's going to put up tight end 1 numbers every single time. But what's that worth when he's only on the field for 4 or 5 games a season? That means you got to carry another tight end to fill in. As for Miami, I think this is a slight bump up for him in terms of situation, just because the quality of quarterback's better. I mean, Tannehill and the laser offense was able to produce with Charles Clay, and I'm fairly confident in saying that Jordan Cameron is just a little bit better than Charles Clay. We still don't know what he's doing, but it's not looking real likely he's going to be back in Miami. But even if he is, that's just 2 tight end sets. I still see Jordan Cameron being the number 1 option in terms of tight ends. But I think we can go ahead and move on to another tight end who probably the biggest, well, not probably, he is the biggest named tight end free agent, and that was Julius Thomas, who signed in Jacksonville and joined the ridiculous receiving corps that is going on in Jacksonville right now. It's kind of crazy to me that they've spent so much on the receiving corps, and yet they've got Toby Gerhart and Denard Robinson there toting the rock. That's a little imbalanced to me. And they're picking way too high to take somebody like Todd Gurley, which I would love if they took Todd Gurley, just as a side note. I don't know. His touchdown upside is obviously not nearly as high because Blake Bortles is going to be lucky to throw 12 touchdowns. Obviously, that's a little bit of a hyperbole, but Blake Bortles is probably going to throw maybe 30 touchdowns next year. I can't see a third of them going to Julius Thomas. It doesn't seem all that likely. Even with a 5,500-yard season that Peyton threw, Julius Thomas didn't even catch 1,000 yards. And I don't think he's going to see more usage as a middle of the field, move the sticks type tight end. And I mean, you've watched more Denver games than I have. Do you think that he could actually be utilized in that role, or is he's a red zone threat?
Yeah, Julius isn't like you said, a move the sticks tight end. He makes or has made a lot of big plays. I mean, the dude has breakaway speed for a guy his size, and at that position, he's a nice red zone threat. I think it's going to go one of 2 ways. Julius is going to go out there and hang a big ass number next year. Drop 1,100, 1,200 yards and 8 to 12 touchdowns, or he's going to drift right back into the middle or back into the pack, in that tight end 8 to 12, whatever, 13 tier, where it's just a complete dice roll every week as to what they're going to do. Uh, is he going to be the number one target? Probably not. I'm of the firm belief that Allen Robinson is a superstar and will be a superstar. He's a wide receiver one in the NFL, and I'm pretty damn sure he's a wide receiver one in fantasy. Maybe not in the year 2015, but I think that's where we're heading there. And it was pretty clear that Blake Bortles loves him some Allen Robinson. Before A-Rob got hurt, he was very relevant. So where does JT slot in? Is Blackman going to come back? Who knows? Nobody knows what Blackman's going to do. If I read something that he got suspended tomorrow, I won't be surprised. Marquise Lee, I don't know. Maybe Marquise Lee's a stud in the future. I don't think so. But like I said, JT for me, first off, Jacksonville, you can have him. We don't want him anymore in Denver. If a guy can't play when he's 80%, then screw him. You can have him. So like I said, it's good. He's either going to go out and blow up, or he's going to drift to the middle of the back of the pack. And I think more likely he's going to finish, on the second end of that. I think he's going to just fall right back into the muddy tier of, low end one, tight end two types. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think this does do more for Bortles' value, though. I think this is going to give him a consistent red zone threat. And I just think it's just one more target that Bortles is going to be able to trust, especially as a rookie. That's well, as a second year QB now, it's going to help something to help him develop. And I think that's enough on Jacksonville. Let's go to another veteran, Frank Gore, moving on to Indianapolis. I really like this move for Indy. I really like this move for Frank Gore. And I like his move for fantasy, too. I don't like it for what Frank Gore is costing right now. I've been a startup right now. He just went in like the 10th round, which is insanity. But if you can go out and pay a third-round pick for Frank Gore on a competing team, do it. Absolutely do it. These are the types of moves we talked about, where if you want to get some production out of the running back position, go after an aging running back. I know a couple of guys, whose opinions I have pretty respect is like Ryan McDowell, Chad Parsons. They talk a lot about filling in that running back position with these aging veterans, and Frank Gore is a perfect example of that. And if Indianapolis can make Zerlon Tipton and Dan Boom Herron and even Trent Richardson look pretty good, I'm willing to bet Frank Gore is going to look pretty damn good too. And if I'm going for a championship this year, I don't care if I have him for 1 year. I'll give up a third-round pick to have Frank Gore put up prime Frank Gore numbers for 1 year. It's what are you going to get in a third-round pick? A lottery ticket. I'd rather throw away a lottery ticket and have a chance at my championship. Plus, I'd just like to see Frank Gore get a Super Bowl ring. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't like Frank Gore? Have you ever heard somebody say, man, I hate Frank Gore? Nobody hates Frank Gore. Good on him, man. And good on Indy realizing that our good man T-Rich might not pan out. They finally threw in the towel. Frank Gore's never been the greatest receiving back. Obviously, let's assume that Bradshaw comes back and he's good to go for 6 games until he breaks his leg or whatever the hell Ahmad Bradshaw's going to do. I like Frank Gore, and I'm similar, of a similar mind to you. Let's look at it from a 2015 perspective, almost like a redraft perspective. Frank Gore should be in a lineup every week. A healthy Frank Gore in that offense is going to produce. They're not going to be if they stack the box on Indianapolis trying to stop the run. Good luck, because you're going to get blown out. So I think it's a fantastic move on both parts for Frank Gore and for Indy. It puts them a little bit closer to a Super Bowl. I mean, they're a title contender right now, and to add a veteran piece like that is just a really, really, really nice move. It's a sweet move. I really like it. So
Yeah,
we agree again.
yeah. This has not been a very fun episode in terms of disagreement, but I am going to disagree with you. I think Frank Gore is a lot better of a receiving back than you give him credit for, and I think the fact that his old defensive coordinator, old boy that's in Buffalo now, whose name I can't think of for whatever reason, had no interest in throwing him the ball. Before him, Frank Gore actually tallied up a decent amount of receptions, and I don't see that as being out of the question for him in Indianapolis. So you're wrong. Take that.
Thank you. I will take it.
All right, let's talk about some more aging veterans, and by aging veterans, I mean Mike Wallace, who's going to be 29, but he feels like he's been around for forever. He got traded to the Minnesota Vikings for a firm handshake and a smile. God, I feel like it was just yesterday. He was the prime target in free agency, and now it's people can't get rid of him fast enough. I don't see the fit with Minneapolis. I think this is terrible. I think this isn't. He's not going to be a good mentor for Charles Johnson or for Cordell Patterson, as I still hold out hope for him. And I don't think the Vikings are that close to being a legit contender that this move makes sense for them. I feel like the cap would make better sense being split up on, a number of players to help improve the quality of their roster instead of burning it away on some bum-ass wide receiver. In terms of fantasy outlook, it's not what it was in Miami. If the Vikings don't draft a wide receiver, I'll be fairly shocked. I think Mike Wallace turns into their number 3 option at best by the time the season starts, and I think his numbers are going to reflect that.
Yeah, this one's tough. This is a salary dump by Miami, and they were probably overjoyed that they found a buyer. They didn't get anything in return. They didn't want anything in return. They were just like, just take this dude. You remember when Mike Wallace was the number 1 to Antonio Brown's number 2? How long ago was that? It's like some alternate universe in which we used to live where Antonio Brown was second fiddle. But Mike Wallace, he's going to be who he always was. He's a burner. He's a deep threat. He's just not going to be anywhere near consistent enough anywhere that he goes to be a week in, week out dependable starter. He's gonna hang a few big weeks. I mean, he does it every year. He's gonna have a few weeks where he explodes, and explode for Mike Wallace is 4 grabs. He's never gonna have these big PPR weeks where he just snags a bunch of balls, because that's not what he does. But I am not entirely sold on Charles Johnson. I know he looked really nice. Cordell for me is still the wide receiver to own in many, for whatever reason, but probably just because I'm insane like that. I bought up so many shares of that dude. But anyway, back to Mike Wallace. I agree with Drew again. He's Mike Wallace. Don't go breaking your neck trying to buy him. Go ahead, try to sell him. I dare you. See what you can get for him. You'll be doing about like Miami. You'll be selling him for just whatever you can get. And you may be better off for it, so you don't have a bunch of zeros in your lineup, 4 weeks out of the year. So That's my take on Mike Wallace. I think we're probably done with him. Our next guy is Torrey Smith to San Francisco. San Francisco paid Torrey a good chunk of change,
Yep.
to come in there. And I guess as far as I know, Crabtree's still kind of in the picture, but very unlikely to come back. Anquan Bolden's old as all hell. Stevie Johnson's gone. So it looks like Torrey could or should be the number one target in San Francisco. I don't know if it does a whole lot for his value. Uh, I guess it's a little bit of an uptick, but because Cap's got that booming arm, and that's what Torrey does well is get behind defenses. But hell, so did Flacco. So, Drew, what do you think about Torrey in San Francisco?
Um. Uh, it's a firm. I don't like him as much as I did in Baltimore, but it's not a bad move. I feel like it's a fairly lateral move. Torrey kind of excels on those deep routes, and he's now going to be playing with one of the best deep ball throwers in terms of arm strength in the league, whereas before he was throwing with one of the best deep ball throwers in the league, except Flacco was accurate. I think he's going to get targeted more. I think Kaepernick, this plays is going to play more into Kaepernick's strengths. I think it's going to see an uptick of value for Kaepernick just a bit. But like, every other fantasy podcast I've listened to this week, God, I would have loved to have seen Torrey Smith and Mark Trestman's offense in Baltimore. But we didn't get to see that. So let's just take our dreams, let's crush those up and throw them in the garbage. And let's think about what he's going to do in San Francisco. I think he's going to pretty much continue to do what he's done his entire career. And that's be inconsistent consistently. He's going to finish the season with decent numbers, but you need to have him, as your 3 or 4. I don't want to be relying on him as my 1 or 2. He's not worth what you used to pay for him, even though he's going to be putting up similar numbers. I think, people kept talking about, I don't think he's hit his ceiling yet. I think we've seen what his ceiling is, and I think he's a fairly safe bet to hit close to that ceiling every year, but it's just not all that exciting of a ceiling. So any other exciting news about Torrey Smith before we move on from him? Yep, I thought so. All right, let's move on to our submitted questions for the week because we've got some decent ones. Start off with first one from Bruce Millis. It says T.Y. Hilton and Andre Johnson. Over/under on catches. Both caught about 85 last year. But now they're going to play together. What do y'all think is going to happen? What do you got? What are you guessing?
Well, let me get off track here for just a second because I just read a tweet and then an article coming out of San Francisco about Chris Borland retiring over concussion issues. So, sorry, I got kind of sidetracked. I shouldn't have picked up my phone while you were talking because that just kind of blows my mind. Anyway.
Wait, Chris Borland, the linebacker.
Correct.
The second-year linebacker. All right, I apologize. We're gonna put this on pause for a second.
Let's go off topic here, and I apologize for that. Reading an article, and there's no telling how valid this is. Chris Borland tells Outside the Lines on, so you want to do what's best for my health. I've researched and experienced, and I don't think it's worth the risk. Talking about repetitive head trauma, blah, 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 blah. Wow. That is mind-blowing.
Wow. To think he was going to be
else.
The starting linebacker in San Francisco.
We had just talked about Chris Borland before we went on air because, man, I got a couple shares of Chris Borland. I love this kid. Yeah, we're getting some stuff in, looking like it's pretty legit. Sad news, man. He seems like
Yeah,
a good kid. Seems like
that's.
a really good kid.
I mean, that's a shame to
But
think.
man, the head trauma's no joke, dude.
Oh, I
You
know.
know, I mean,
I
man,
mean, it's a shame for him. The fact that he's so young and it's already such a concern. I feel for the guy. I mean,
yeah. So let's cross our fingers that that this is not confirmed, not the real deal, and if it is, prayers go out to Chris Borland. And good on him realizing that life is more important than football. So anyway, I apologize for sidetracking the podcast, but I literally read that and I couldn't even think straight. So I guess we're talking about Ty and Andre right now, right?
yep. Over under on their catches for
Okay.
this year.
When I saw the Andre deal, I posted in one of our leagues. Lock it down. Dre goes for 85, minimum of 1,100, 8 touchdowns. Dre's back on the scene next year. Andrew Luck's going to feed the guy the ball. He might actually become a red zone threat for once. Where in Houston, whether it was him or the offense or the shitty quarterbacks or whatever you want to say, he was allergic to the end zone. So I think Dre is gonna have a really nice year. T.Y. Hilton, man, I just can't buy into T.Y. Hilton. I just can't do it, and I don't know why I can't. Uh, Not all that dissimilar to like a Deshaun Jackson or a Mike Wallace type to me. Even though he had this really nice year last year and he had crazy amount of targets and he was super consistent, I still view him in a different light than I do Antonio Brown's, Julio Jones, those kind of guys. Even though he put up similar numbers last year. So I think the over under sitting right at 85. I think it's high for Ty. I really do. I think Ty is going to come in. We need a 80 range maybe. Of course, his yards per catch are going to be great. He's going to have some big plays. I don't know how sustainable his touchdown rate is because a lot of them come on the long ball. And when Luck gets down tight, that's where he's looking for Fleener. He's looking for Dwayne Allen. He's looking for Ahmad Bradshaw, Frank. Or I think Andre's going to be a nice red zone target. So that's kind of where I put him. I think Dre is going to lead the Colts in receptions and yards next year. That's my hot take of the week, I guess, so to speak.
I feel like I got to take off my beanie. It's pretty scorching. I'm not sold on Andre at his age. I think he's going to be closer to 65, 70. He's going to be a lot closer to his stat line from 2014 than 85 plus. In terms of touchdowns, I don't even have a guess. I don't know if it's him or if it's. I almost have to think it's him with the number of offensive coordinators he's gone through and the fact that he's never hit 10 touchdowns, being the borderline Hall of Fame wide receiver he is. That's got to be something with Andre's game that just it doesn't play to his strengths. In terms of TY, I'm taking the over on 85 catches. I think 100 might be stretching it, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him take 90 plus. I'm slowly coming around on him. I don't want to be caught in the aftermath like I was with Antonio Brown because I think I've ended up viewing them very similarly. And it took me a while to come around on Antonio Brown. It took until 2014 for me to see that, this guy's pretty friggin' legit. And I think T.Y. Hilton's getting kind of not enough credit just because of his size, that he's not that prototypical wide receiver, but he's fairly similar build to Antonio Brown, and Antonio Brown is tearing the league up. I agree his touchdown production is probably not very sustainable, but If he puts up the same numbers he did last year in terms of fantasy production, I wouldn't be all that surprised. Now, wide receiver he didn't mention is Dante Moncrief. Rest in peace. All my shares. I don't think this is necessarily an indictment on Dante Moncrief. If you're competing for a championship, you're signing Frank Gore and Andre Johnson. You're signing a Hall of Fame wide receiver. It doesn't mean, hey, we think this second-year wide receiver is not that good. It means, hey, we're going to get this veteran wide receiver in our offense because he's a friggin' Hall of Fame wide receiver. I mean, if you go ask front offices, it's like, who do you think is the better wide receiver, Andre Johnson or Dante Moncrief? I don't think you're going to get another Dante Moncrief support. So I'm still holding out hope. I think we just have to wait a little bit longer, which he didn't ask at all, but I just find it hard not to talk about Dante Moncrief.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about the Colts wide receivers and the impact on them, yeah, Moncrief's got to be brought up. I mean, Moncrief was a bit of a project coming in anyway, right? So if he's not in year two, it's not all that big of a surprise. It's not like Andre's got 5 years left. It just, Andre's probably viable next year. He is viable next year. He may be viable 2016, but Moncrief's, he's the future big man. The wide receiver one, so to speak, or the Z in Indianapolis. And I think all this does is just kind of doesn't necessarily temper your expectations. It just kind of postpones your gratification, much like Devontae. A little jab at you there, Drew. Bring up Devontae just because we haven't yet this week. So I know we're both still reeling from Cobb re-signing.
Dig the knife in deeper, why don't you?
Hey, it is what it is. I was so ready to plug Devontae into my lineups this year, and I'm going to end up having to do it anyway. But it's not going to be as sexy as I thought it was going to be, and it's very similar with Moncrief. He was a little bit raw coming out anyway. So, as a Moncrief owner, where I own him, I'm not really competing next year anyway. So cool. Get him a year with like you said, a Hall of Fame wide receiver. Andre Johnson's he's an old salt. Who better to teach this kid how to play, how to run routes, how to be a possession receiver? Because that's who Andre is, man. Andre has always been a target hog, man. The dude. Even in 2013, if you add some touchdowns to Andre's numbers, I mean, dude was beastly. And even last year he caught 85 balls, which was surprising to see that he did. But he did catch 85 passes last year. Now the yards per catch were terrible, but yeah. So anyway, Drew, you got anything else on that one?
I think the biggest impact on this, besides waiting on Dante Moncrief, is I think this is going to shoot down Coby Fleener's value. I think that Indianapolis is going to be looking at a lot more 3 wide receiver sets than they did in the past. And they're probably going to go 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. And Dwayne Allen is a hell of a lot better run blocker. I think that's going to keep Fleener off the field a lot more. So for all of you guys investing in Fleener as, a top 120, top 130 pick in startups, I'd temper your expectations. I haven't been a big proponent of Fleener in the past, so I might be writing this narrative to support what I already believe, but it's what makes sense to me. You got anything else you want to touch on before we move on?
Nah, I think we hit that one pretty good.
All right, let's hit our next one from Canucks Island. How do you see the Cleveland running back situation panning out this year? In many rankings, Crowell and West are very close to each other. Do you anticipate one of the two having a breakout year, or do you think they'll stick to the committee? For owners wanting to grab the handcuff in this situation, what kind of value, rookie picks or otherwise, would you give up for the other guy? I'm going to be straight up. I think that Crowell is far and away the better running back on the team. I think the fact that the only reason West gets near as much rope to hang himself with is because they moved up in the draft to take him. Defensive coordinators, there's a new offensive coordinator. Kyle Shanahan is not running the running back carousel anymore. I think we're going to see a lot closer to one running back getting a higher percentage of the carries, and I think it's going to be Crowell because besides his his fumbling issues, he was clearly the better back. If you look at his numbers with Alex Mack and then without Alex Mack, his numbers were affected the least by a weakened defensive line. I think that goes to show that he's probably the most talented runner there. If you're going to buy Terrence West, I don't know what you're paying for him. What do you think about the situation?
I think it's just a big who. I agree. I agree with you that Crowell is the more talented back. It was just so screwy last year because you'd look up in 1 week, West is starting. The next week, here comes Ben Tate, and then Crowell, and then Crowell's inactive, and then here comes West. And my God, that's just a ride I want off of. Crowell's going to be pretty expensive. He's going to cost a lot more than West. So let's say I own Crowell, and I can't sell him for what I want, and I want to go get West. And we've talked about how I'm big on group and backfield. So if I own Crowell, I absolutely want West. I'd probably give up. I'd be comfortable giving up a late second, early third for Terrence West. I don't think that's would be an issue for me. If I own West and I don't own Crowell, I'll just ride out the Terrence West thing and see what happens. Maybe Terrence West gets 150, 160 touches next year. Maybe he becomes the lead back there for some reason. Crowell did have those quote-unquote character issues coming out, which you don't know if that's still going to follow him around. It certainly looks to have gone away, but so this is a backfield that I want to avoid. In general, I think Crowell is exceptionally talented, but that whole situation last year in Cleveland just makes me really, really uneasy. So that's where I'm sitting, firmly on the fence with the Cleveland backfield.
I'm kind of surprised that you value West so low, and considering I was, probably the biggest anti-Terrence West guy I knew last offseason. I'd probably give up a mid-second for Terrence West right now if I own Crowell, and my running backs aren't strong enough to take the loss of Crowell. Which, it's a precarious situation. I'd wait till closer to the draft and see if I couldn't move a mid-second for West and future third, whatever. But I think West has a little bit more value than an early third, late second, just a bit. But overall, give me Crowell 10 out of 10 times. I think he's far superior back, and I think he's got everything he needs to be a workhorse back in the NFL, besides an offensive coordinator and a head coach that trust him.
Yeah, I can completely agree with you on that point that Crowell has the talent. It's just in today's NFL, it'll send you to the loony bin, man. Ask anybody, me, Drew included, who's owned Stephen Ridley and Shane Vereen, and who rode the Jonas Gray train last year. And I don't think it's a similar deal, but I'm so gun shy with this unknown at running back. I'd rather just have freaking Danny Woodhead, who I know is going to catch 5 balls, and just give me that, and let's go from there. But like I said, it's just too much unknown for me to be very comfortable with. for me and what I want to do with my running backs. I'm not going to pay anything for them. I'm not going to go paying for Isaiah Crowell. If I already have him, sweet. That's great. I will be actively looking to move him because that's what I'm always doing. But I'm not going to go breaking my neck to get Terrence West. I'm not going to pay just a whole lot for him. And like I said, if I own Terrence West, if I can sell him to the Crowell, if not, I'll just hang on to him. Maybe get a few starts out of him, or maybe more. So, like I said, firmly on the fence.
All right, let's move on to our next one, which is a fairly thrilling question. It comes from Silbaz. Tyler, where would you take Ruben Randall if he were in this year's rookie draft?
Drew, I wouldn't give your 5th rounder for Ruben Randall. I don't want anything to do with Ruben Randall. Beckham, Victor Cruz. Victor Cruz, he's going to be back. We don't know how good he's going to be, but he's going to be back. Corey Washington's a guy that they're high on, or at least what you read on that they're somewhat high on. Marcus Harris is another guy that kind of flashed in the preseason last year. Ruben Randall's just a guy, man. For me, just a guy. And the unknown, being it a 3rd rounder, 4th rounder, whatever you want to call it, unknown has a higher ceiling than just a guy, which is what Ruben Randall is. So I want nothing to do with him. If I'm in a free agent rookie draft and Ruben Randall's out there, I'm the guy that's just going to keep passing and let somebody else get some value or whatever you want to call it on proven production of Ruben Randall. And I'm done with it. I don't want anything to do with it. Fest engaged.
Ruben Randall has proved that he can perform at a mediocre level. That said, I'd give up a late 3rd for him. He's somebody you can plug into your lineup as your wide receiver 5, because most of our leagues you can fit wide receivers in your lineup. And he's somebody that'll give you some points. He's somebody that he's going to get targeted. It's just a function of that offense. But I'm not going to be happy about it. I'm not going to be excited. Don't take it. For those of my league mates, don't take this as your opportunity to come try and sell Ruben Randall to me. I'm just not that interested. But let's move on to Sticky Z's question. Old Adam comes with us with, I imagine y'all will talk about the Foles-Bradford trade in detail. This is the Bradford talk we're talking about. But if you guys could touch on the rest of the St. Louis receivers and Mason, we've never seen Quick, Bailey, Tavon, Mason play with a QB that's better than Austin Davis and Sean Hill. Wondering if they get the bumps or not. Tyler, you read this wrong.
I did, and I realized that just now, and shame on me.
I know.
My bad.
That's what happens when you get old. You forget to put your reading glasses on.
There you go. In the world that we're in, I'm a ripe old 35.
All right, Grandpa.
My bad.
So, I guess we'll take this opportunity to touch on Sam Bradford in Philadelphia just a little bit, because I'm sure the NFL Network hasn't, beat us to death with it yet. You know what? Let's not. Because I don't want to talk about it, and I don't think anybody has any interest in hearing about it. I think we've all heard it ad nauseum at this point. Any complaints?
None from me, but I did just read a tweet from Adam Schefter that Chris Borland has retired. Came from Schefter and Chris Mortensen. That's official, man. When those two dudes say it, that's official business. Yeah. That is devastating. Poor guy. I hope he's okay, man. Yeah. I really do. I hope it's not something where he's already experiencing, chronic migraines or memory loss or anything like that. I really, really hope that that's not the case, because, for anybody, that's a shame. He just seemed like you'd never read anything bad about Chris Borland from his coaches, his college coaches. Everything just said he was a stand-up guy. And one hell of a linebacker, what could have been. What a bummer.
Absolutely. I'm hoping this move was preventative on his end, and he's looking out for his future more than he's doing this out of necessity. I hope that his health really isn't in danger right now. So, thoughts and prayers go out to Chris Borland right now. So I guess we'll move on to our next question with a little bit of somber news. Lucifer X88 asks us, interested to hear how you think the Jimmy Graham trade impacts the rest of the Saints players. Also, what do you think of the rumored deal of Breeze to the Bucks for the number 1 pick? We already touched on Jimmy Graham to the Jimmy Graham trade pretty thoroughly, but I feel like I kind of need to address this idea of trading Drew Brees just a little bit, and I'm going to do my rant of the week just a little bit early. The trade talks about Drew Brees, all of that was started by one joke tweet from one moron. It got retweeted by one of the Saints beat writers with a following tweet that said, "Hey, check out this ass clown." And then everyone retweeted the first tweet and didn't realize the second tweet. So, tons of swirling rumors with no basis in reality. There's no legitimacy to the idea that Drew Brees is going to be traded. If Drew Brees were to be traded, Sean Payton would get fired, Mickey Loomis would get fired, Tom Benson would get fired from life because everyone in New Orleans would hunt his wrinkled old ass down and beat him in the streets. Drew Brees will retire a Saint. Book it. He's not going anywhere. I don't care if he's throwing 30 interceptions and still wants to keep playing. He'll keep playing. It's what's going to happen. There's no way. And it's not like they're going to be able to unload his contract on anyone anyways. There's no legitimacy to the idea that Drew Brees is going to be traded to anyone for anything. Drew Brees will retire a New Orleans Saint. There's been no suggestion by anyone with any real knowledge that would say any different. And I feel like that's all I need to say about that. So let's move on to our next question. From Checkesel? Chex Mix. There we go. We've seen the Colts and Pep Hamilton desperately try to build a run game by bringing in T. Rich and Ahmad Bradshaw in 2014. They managed to post the 22nd most rushing yards in the NFL while leading the league in passing. How does the recent signing of Frank Gore affect the dynasty value of Colts quarterback Andrew Luck? Do you think the Colts will still be in the top 10 passing yards in 2015? Tyler, you have the floor.
Well, first off, there's not much you can do to negatively affect Andrew Luck's dynasty value. I mean, pretty much everybody across the board has him as the number 1 QB. I don't see how this makes a whole lot of difference. Will they still be top 10 in passing yards in 15? Probably. I mean, the Pep Hamilton offense, it looked a little different last year than what I thought it was going to look like, right? I didn't see Luck just going ham like he did. He was still going to be, a very, very highly ranked dynasty quarterback, more so due to his age and his pedigree, not necessarily based on what we thought his 2014 production was going to be, which I think we can all admit was just crazy. Like I said, adding Frank Gore, it's a plus, I mean, the teams are going to have to pay more attention to the run, which I think is going to open up the middle of the field more. Andre Johnson, I've already gone on my Andre Johnson love fest. He's going to help Andrew Luck tremendously, because who was the number 2 target last year? Reggie Wayne, who was busted up all year, and sweet Hakeem Nicks. So, Andrew Luck's a stud. He's a superstar. He's the QB1. He's the QB1 for a reason. I mean, you could argue Aaron Rodgers, and I will argue Aaron Rodgers. but I'm not putting him. I'm not ready to say that I'm going to take Aaron Rodgers over Andrew Luck. 'Cause Andrew Luck's the man. I mean, he put that team on his back last year and carried him. So I don't think it's a positive or a negative to Andrew Luck's value. I think it's overall a positive to Indianapolis on the whole. Because T. Rich was terrible. Ahmad Bradshaw was really, really nice when he was playing, but Ahmad Bradshaw gets hurt, folks. That's what Ahmad Bradshaw does. He's done it. I mean, for as long as I can remember, the dude's been around a hot minute, and he's always hurt. So, like I said, Frank Gore's a plus to the Indy. I don't know if he's a plus or a minus to Andrew Luck, but go try to buy Andrew Luck. I dare you. It's going to cost you a pretty penny. So, Drew, what you got, man?
Yeah. I think even if you think Frank Gore will affect Andrew Luck in 2015, I don't think any responsible dynasty owner can say that actually affects his dynasty value because it's such a short-term impact. If it affects him for 2015 and Frank Gore retires in 2016, then what does that? It doesn't do anything about the rest of Andrew Luck's fantastic career ahead of him. I'm thinking it's the whole point of dynasty. As for, do you think the Colts will still be in the top 10 of passing yards in 2015? I hope so. I really do. Pep Hamilton's offense, like you said, never looked like it did before in 2014. Andrew Luck had 223 touchdown seasons before 2014, and I was expecting right around that for last year, and that didn't happen at all. So when I sold Andrew Luck in my 2QB league, that backfired.
And to whom did you sell him?
I don't know, some hairy old man. I hate you. But yeah, Andrew Luck tore it up, and I think it's completely because Andrew Luck tore it up. It has nothing to do with the offense that Pep Hamilton chose to run. I think it's because Andrew Luck was able to run the offense more than he was in previous years. I think it's shown that he's able to still develop, which at the quality of prospect that he's still getting better is mind-boggling. And as a Luck owner in other leagues, super exciting. This guy is still the number one dynasty QB. He's going to be the number one dynasty QB until I don't know, Peyton Manning's kid is old enough to declare for the draft or something. I could see on the situation. I could see where that changes. He's a friggin' stud. That's all there is to say about it. So let's move on to Amaro 900's question: Murray versus Matthews. No first name, so let's assume it's Latavius Murray against Jordan Matthews. No, in all legitimacy, he wants our thoughts on DeMarco Murray versus Ryan Matthews in Philadelphia. I think it's pretty clear DeMarco Murray is going to be the main beneficiary of being in the Chip Kelly offense. He's going to get most of the carries. He's going to see work in the passing game, and he's going to get most of the stats. I think Ryan Matthews is going to be a backup running back that sees a little bit better than backup running back stats. DeMarco Murray, you're going to pay for what DeMarco Murray, whatever you're going to pay for him when he's in Dallas, you're going to pay the same thing for him when he's in Philadelphia. Any agreement, disagreement there? What do you got, bud?
Yeah, I like what you said about Ryan Matthews being a backup running back that's going to get more touches than your typical backup running back. I think that's exactly what we're going to find out here. DeMarco, of course, got the Oklahoma bias going on here, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but there is some factual basis here. DeMarco's in a contract year. All of a sudden, DeMarco plays all 16. He plays with a broken hand. He was pretty banged up at the end of the year, and the dude was a straight-up stud last year, right? DeMarco Murray will not play 16 games next year. And I will almost guarantee you DeMarco Murray won't play 16 games next year. He had a ridiculous amount of touches this year, just insane amount of touches. There is a 0% chance that he duplicates that amount of touches. Granted, he's in a little bit more of a high-powered offense, but I don't know that it's going to really. It's not necessarily a better offense for fantasy running back, I guess. Uh, Ryan Matthews is much the same as DeMarco Murray. He gets hurt. It's what he does. I would rather have Ryan Matthews at a third of the cost of DeMarco is where I would be on this. I'd be comfortable saying a startup draft taking Ryan Matthews in, I don't know, the teens, somewhere in the teens. Because DeMarco's going to get hurt. And Ryan Matthews will carry a pretty good bit of value to you as a DeMarco handcuff or to the DeMarco owner. Ryan Matthews is going to be pretty attractive to the DeMarco owner right now. I got to think if I own DeMarco anywhere, which I just sold my last share this morning, I would definitely be looking for Ryan Matthews. So I said DeMarco versus Ryan Matthews. I don't know if there's a versus there. Obviously, DeMarco is clearly the more valuable player, the player that you would rather have, but at what cost? Because he's going to cost you quite a bit right now. The hype is pretty high on the guy. Like I said, I'd rather have Ryan Matthews at a much, much, much lower cost because you're going to be able to pop him in your lineup a few weeks next year, even if you don't trade him, because DeMarco is going to get hurt. And I wouldn't be surprised if Chip is getting Ryan Matthews 10, 12 touches a game. That's, I think 150 touches on the year would be pretty reasonable for Matthews, even assuming that DeMarco plays all year. So like I said, it's just kind of a weird little situation they got there. And then we got this other guy that we forget about, Darren Sproles. He's still going to get some work.
A lot of receptions.
Sure. Yeah, Darren Sproles is a decent receiver. That's one facet of his game, I guess you could say. So, I think it's a pretty big ding to DeMarco's dynasty value going to Philly versus running behind those beasts at the offensive line in Dallas. I wasn't buying him before. I'm not buying him now, but Ryan Matthews kind of intrigues me, a little bit more than he ever has. And I'm not a big Ryan Matthews guy, but well, he could sure carry some trade value next season, especially to the DeMarco owner.
Yeah, I'm not really going to touch any more on Ryan Matthews because I think you hit it right on the head. But for Murray, I think it's more of it's kind of a lateral move for him. It's he's going from running behind just a monster offensive line to running behind still one of the best offensive lines in the league. And he's going to be running with one of the most creative offensive minds in the game right now. But he's going to see a reduced amount of carries. I think we're going to end up seeing definitely similar numbers in terms of efficiency, but I think his overall numbers are going to be a bit lower. And by a bit, I mean probably a decent bit. I think he's still going to see running back one numbers in terms of points per game. I'm not going to guess on if he's going to get injured or not. I don't know that, he's got the injury-prone label. I wouldn't be surprised if he got injured. But, after doing a significant amount of research this week, there's not as much of a correlation between carries in a season and, their performance next year as much as I thought there was in the past. So I'm not using that to kind of curse DeMarco Murray's future. I'm still apprehensive about him as a player based on my previous opinions of him. But I can't see him doing a whole lot worse in Philadelphia than he was doing in Dallas in terms of his efficiency.
I mean, his efficiency should remain the same, but the thing he had going in Dallas was he was the man. I mean, he was the only man because Lance Dunbar and Joseph Randle are not the man or the men. They're a far cry from it. So Yeah, DeMarco, like I said, I'd take nothing away from what he did last year because he was amazing. Like I said, I've already said I live in DFW. I watch the Cowboys every week. I'm not the biggest Cowboy fan in the world. I don't hate him. But, I mean, he was unreal. True value, his real value lied in that he is one of the very, very few workhorses left in the league, or he was one of the very few workhorses left in the league. There are very, very few teams that just, like I said before, shove a ball down the guy's throat and tell him to run, and that's what DeMarco brought to the table last year. So we already knew he was going to be splitting, when he signs with Philly, we already knew he was going to be splitting some time with Sproles. Sproles is going to get some of those touches, right? Excuse me. They're not bringing Ryan Matthews in to do nothing. Ryan Matthews is incredibly talented. He's going to take some of those touches. Chip Kelly runs this crazy-ass offense. Don't be surprised if Josh Huff gets some of those touches. Will DeMarco put up RB1 numbers when he's on the field? Probably. But he's not going to be getting 25 or 30 touches a game. If he does, I'll be surprised. I really will. So for me, it's a big ding in value, if anything, just based upon the expected volume, which I don't see any way that it doesn't decrease significantly going to Philly.
I think you might be underestimating the increase in total snaps that offense is going to take between Dallas and Philly. The amount of offensive snaps that Philly has in a season is so far and above what they take in comparison to other teams. So even if DeMarco's getting a smaller share of the total snaps, it's still going to be a higher number than compared to other teams if he was taking the same percentage. I agree he's not going to see the same workload he did in Dallas, but I don't think it's going to be the same decrease that a lot of people are envisioning for him. I think if Ryan Matthews sees 160, 180 touches, I think DeMarco Murray could still easily see 300 touches.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, that's definitely something to take into account that, man, Philly runs a lot of plays, and they run them at a very fast pace. And that's another thing that once that guy's on the field, let's say DeMarco opens the series, he's probably not coming off the field.
Yep.
At least until, the clock stops or the chains are moving or what have you. But I guess it could go the other way. If Matthews opens the series, he's liable to stay on the field until he breaks his ankle or whatever. So, like I said, for me, you know how I am with RBs. I'm always looking for a way to knock them. I'm always looking for a way to knock an OU player as well. So, sue me. I'm biased.
Never in my life would I have predicted I would be playing devil's advocate for DeMarco Murray, but
only with me.
What do you get? I gotta do what I gotta do. But yeah, I'm not as low on him as I was previously. I think his outlook is still fairly good. And I've been looking at the time. We have been running fairly long. So for all those that stuck along for the long haul, thank you. For those of you guys whose question we didn't make it to, I apologize. I really do. I promise we'll get to you next week. We're going to be wrapping it up for now. Tyler, you got any last parting shots for this week?
No, sir. Thanks everybody for listening. We do appreciate the questions. Sorry we haven't been able to get to everything. We've had the Dynasty as hell question up for 3 or 4 weeks, and we still haven't been able to get to it. Sticky, we'll get to it, dude. I promise. We will get there. We need to move it further up the list next week so that we touch on it, because that league is it's a whole nother level, man. That league is nuts.
I think you mean it's hell, but guys,
there you go.
Scott will be back with us next week. This has been the Dynasty Playbook, Dynasty FF's dedicated podcast. I'm your host, Drew. You can find me on Reddit at EAF Marine and on Twitter at Drew Dotson NFL. With me has been my co-host, Tyler. You can find Tyler on Reddit at Barrels and on Twitter at HBomb9508. For those of you not following Tyler on Reddit, go check him out. Give him a follow. He's starting to learn how to do this Twitter thing.